So welcome to Sonya, Heckler, Cheyne, and Jenny, and her co-host. They will be introducing themselves. I, as you might know, just popped in over from the education panel, so I'm a bit out of sorts. But I'm okay to do some housekeeping with you. I'm very happy to have you all here. And as people still join this session, I just want to let you know that this presentation will be held in English. If you would like or be more comfortable with following the session in your own language or a language of your choosing, I just put the link to Wordly in the chat. I think most of you are already familiar with that, how that works. And the meeting is recorded so that people and we all can watch it again and again afterwards. But if you're not comfortable with being seen on live video, then I would just ask you to turn it off, to turn off your video. And I would also ask you during the presentation to put yourself on mute, which all of you seem to have done anyways. And without much further ado, I'm very happy to welcome our presenters, and I'm happy to have you. And I wish all of us a wonderful presentation and a great time. And over to you, Sonya.
Thank you, Sabine. So I'm Sonya Heckler Cheyne, and I have an impromptu guest. This is my stepdaughter, Landry. And she got out of school early today. She's a freshman, and we are in Texas. And if you know anything about Texas, football comes first. So when they have out-of-town games, school releases early. And I invited her to join me today because of several reasons. She is a freshman, and I believe in 7th grade, she started reading Man's Search for Meaning, the juvenile edition, and has read it multiple times. And I am working on a book on aging and elder care, and she has been my co-editor to, as we've heard about Ellie helping Dr. Frankel keep his on an understandable level and say, no, you've got to redo this. She is serving that role with me on this book. So she's very familiar with the presentation. And since she's come into my life the last 7 years, my mother had cancer, and then my dad had a traumatic brain injury and Alzheimer's, and both of them have passed away. And she was very involved in their caregiving, especially with my father. So she is, despite her young age, she is familiar with logotherapy as well as the presentation and where this is originating from and why I'm presenting on this topic. So I wanted to invite her to join us and introduce her to everyone. So her name is Landry. And I'm going to load the PowerPoint, and then I'll get right into it. Let's see here. Okay, it's full screen on my end. Sabine, can you nod if it's okay? Good job. All right, I need to hide the side panel so I can see my screen.
There you go.
Okay. The reason I wanted to present on this topic is, as I was doing the research on aging, there are domains and components to aging, which I will share in the presentation. And while they align with logotherapy, such as mental and physical, and there are several others, what I noticed is in the literature, there's not a specific categorical domain that discusses how our existential perspectives or our personal experiences affect how we age in life, and even later, how they can affect mental health and aging. And I really feel like this is a gap that needs to be addressed, and that logotherapy supports that there is research and theory and the philosophy to support existential aging as a categorical domain in the literature. That said, of course, there is also a gap and needs future studies on it. And I am like a future previous presenter that my icons, there they are. Okay. So our learning objectives are, I'm going to discuss the current 8 domains of aging in the research right now and help understand how these domains fail to represent aging from an existential perspective. I want to propose logotherapy as an avenue to inclusion of an existential domain in aging. And I've seen some of your names popping up, and I'm very hopeful and knowledgeable of y'all that y'all can help me discuss and brainstorm this gap and any solutions for existential aging as a consideration for the domain. And also to offer a connection between aging and end-of-life populations and even caregivers through this existential domain of and logotherapy. So those are the learning objectives. So why this topic? How did I discover the gap? First, I was studying aging in the research, and these domains is what I call them. They unfolded of what people have researched that contribute to aging and aging differently across the lifespan beyond our chronological age. What I noticed is there was a gap in the phenomenological and existential domains. Phenomenological is somewhat addressed, existential even less so. So my response is I wanted to establish this as an existential aging domain, but I also, throughout the book, as we age and approach the end of our lifespan, and we know the research is there in many professions for logotherapy, of how logotherapy offers value to help people understand meaning, whether it be meaning in the moment or when they're reflecting upon their lifespan and their purpose at that moment in time, or as they age, or as they are confronting the end of their life, and maybe again reflecting on their life. And so future directions for the research, logotherapy as an approach for an aging process, addressing the aging process for those confronting end of life, and even for caregivers. Some of this are, as we know, is already in the research. The expectation of aging populations and geriatrics is expected to explode by 2050. There are gaps, not only in my presentation, but many professions that will be serving or affected by aging populations. And logotherapy offers so much value for those that are aging and those that will be serving them and caregivers. So that's where this presentation stemmed from. I'm starting at the top of this upside down pyramid with the domains of aging, and I'll introduce those to you. And then one domain out of the ones I explained somewhat relates to logotherapy, and that's the spiritual and religious aging. And y'all can tell by how it's worded that it's not going to be aligned with logotherapy or existential experiences for the individual, which is where the phenomenological, existential aging, and logotherapy will come in. So as we go through this presentation, I'm picking up on one domain in the research and showing why that is not the same as Frankel's noetic dimension in spiritual aging, and why these domains do not address existential aging. So the domains of aging that came up in the research as I was performing this, and I really wasn't, I didn't realize it was so vast until I got into the research, but aging in itself is a unique representation of the personal world and lifespan experiences influenced by internal and external elements. So even there, we have the existential relationship to aging. Current research is multifaceted. Often it's interwoven within the domains. So the domains that I have found in the research are chronological, our current age, our biological experiences in life, environmental factors that surrounding us that we come into contact with throughout our life, our ability to function physically and otherwise, our physiological state and abilities, the mental or psychological, our sociological world, and then spiritual. So those are the domains that were prevalent in the research. Phenomenological aging wasn't addressed, but as you'll see in a later slide, research by Armstrong offers a workable definition for the phenomenological aging that could lead into existential aging, which is minimally addressed in research in two areas. One was through the meaning of time in seniors, and one was when an existential crisis is being experienced. So aging is not generalizable or universal. It's like DNA, our teeth, our fingerprints. It's a representation of our unique individual essence of personal identity at the cellular level, revealing truths about our distinctive life influences. So through living, all of us as individuals experience the domains of aging, yet existential aging isn't even considered in the research, or it's minimal. Unique individual experiences also contribute to how we age individually as a person. So aging, similar to logotherapy, cannot be globalized across all people and all humans. There's commonalities, but our individual life will affect how we age. So by viewing aging through these categorical domains, we can understand the phenomenology and existentiality of the individual holistically. So first, I want to back up to the spiritual and religious aging in the research. And this is the only domain I'm going to focus on that out of those categories I presented on the previous slide. Spiritual versus religious. This is a common discussion. It's a preference and belief about the differences between the two terms. It are personal and deserve respect. And where I'm coming from with that is some people do not separate the two. They consider them as one, whereas some people consider them very different and may consider themselves spiritual, but not religious. So that in itself is an individual experience. Spiritual age is subjective. It's not objective. It's subjective and it's very abstract. So it's less definable for all of humanity because it is an individual experience and relationship. Uniquely, spiritual age is unique because it doesn't entail the loss of ability. So as we age, the other domains in the literature can involve a loss of ability, functioning, and capacities. However, spiritual age can strengthen as we age. It can change. It's a malleable, flexible experience. Research does show that there's a greater tendency towards well-being in older adults who are more religious when compared to those that are not. So that's more on the religious side. Rose Marin explained that both spirituality and religion relate to sacred relationships. So he offered the following definition to distinguish between the two. Spirituality refers to any way of relating to that which is regarded as sacred. So the relationship. Whereas religion is defined as institutionalized or culturally bound ways of relating to that which is perceived to be sacred. One is relationship and one is perception. One is personal and one is culturally or worldly influenced. In reviewing these, while some are compatible, I don't feel that spiritual and religious aging addresses Frankel's noetic dimension and that human spirit within each of us that's unique to the person. So I mentioned Armstrong offered a phenomenological definition. This is actually from a literary perspective. It is not psychology. It has nothing to do with gerontology, but I felt like the definition is workable to bridge the gap between the spiritual and aging domains and to existential. What he said is, what do you mean by phenomenological? Phenomenology is a philosophy of experience. For phenomenology, the ultimate source of all meaning and value is the lived experience of human beings. All philosophical systems, scientific theories, or aesthetic judgments have the status of abstractions from the ebb and flow of the lived world. The task of the philosopher, according to phenomenology, is to describe the structures of experience, in particular consciousness and the imagination, relations with other people, and the situatedness of the human subject in society and history. Phenomenological theories of literature regard works of art as mediators between the consciousness of the author and the reader, or as attempts to disclose aspects of the being of humans and their worlds. And since we're a day and a half into the conference now and you've been attending sessions, I'm confident that you can see commonalities between Frankel's logotherapy in this definition. My thought is this definition of phenomenology can bridge into existential aging and bridge humanity into the individual's experiences in life, their own existential experiences. We also know logotherapy is a life philosophy, and that Frankel studied and was well-versed and integrated philosophy into logotherapy. So how does this relate to aging and logotherapy? Reidinger, this is available online, but it presented at a conference in Brazil. And the presentation was about the need for exploration of the role of phenomenology and existential analysis in logotherapy. It was specific to therapy settings, but Reidinger proposed that ontologically, the role of phenomenology is comprehensible. However, on the I'm getting tongue-tied. On the ontic levels of psychic disorders in a therapeutic stance, the use of the concept is less clear. So if there's more research needed still in this regard. But Reidinger did say, on an ontological level, existential analysis rejects the subject-object dichotomy and assumes that relation is ontological prior to any form of substance. Further, the central concepts, which are existence, intention, freedom, responsibility, values, and emotion, are all drawn from phenomenologists, mainly from Heidegger and Scheller. And those central concepts, to me, align with logotherapy as well as existentialism. And when I look at those, I see how they could relate to how we age throughout the lifespan. And it's a need that is missing in the literature, except for the last one, and emotions could be drawn from some of the other domains, but again, is not specific. Other researchers have explored phenomenology and logotherapy in diverse topic explorations. One study, and I've seen Lance presented a couple of times throughout the Congress, was studying Edith Stein's phenomenology definition. Bushkin did a psychobiographical consideration of Frankel's life. Below, and researchers studied existential phenomenology in relation with the neurological sciences and mental health. There's many studies related to Husserl and Scheller. And then just a Google search using the keywords of Frankel and phenomenology produced 409,000 results. So phenomenology and logotherapy are being explored. The aging component is less so. Which led me to this study. This is from a nursing perspective, and it was a study, the existential meaning of time for the age. I couldn't access the full article, but I thought the abstract offered a valuable perspective of time when aging and looking at the end of life stages. The notion of time is particularly important to seniors because their future prospects are more limited. The past plays a very significant role. It serves as an anchor for the present and a guideline for the future. The passage of time is not uniform for everyone. It evolves over years and is based on accumulated experiences and personal factors such as age, activity, and interests. For this reason, the older a person gets, the more each minute counts. Time is also indicative of change and is revered as the value of values. It is a useful tool for highlighting and valuing the present moment and the actual task to be accomplished in the here and now. It is essential that nurses understand the subjective reality of time to each individual patient if they are to give quality care. Comprehending time's existential meaning to seniors will add further dimension to nursing interventions that are based on Watson's model of care. To me, this supports, again, existential aging as a domain for aging in the lifespan and older people. And the last comment, as I shared, my dad had neurocognitive deterioration and problems. And I've considered when someone is impaired cognitively, and this actually came up in the presentation with Doreen earlier, if they have intellectual disabilities or cognitive or neurocognitive deterioration, or it's not functioning properly, what does that look like for their meaning, their purpose, and even their attitude? Even with short-term memory loss, I say that there can be meaning in the moment. They may not remember it, and it may have to continue in each moment and over again. But I even witnessed that with my dad. He was able to have meaning even though his world was changing and slipping away, and his mind wasn't working and his body wasn't working properly, which are two domains in aging that did not address him as a whole person. So how does logotherapy respond to the proposed existential aging? So Yoon and Lay suggest that I'm returning to the spiritual domain in the research that isn't quite the same as logotherapy. They suggest that spirituality is cross-cultural, affective, transcendent, and experiential, whereas religion is structured, denominational, external, cognitive, ritualistic, and public. Similar to the definition we saw earlier, but I do see more logotherapy in the spirituality. Existentially, spiritual age from the logotherapy perspective represents a personal journey to find purpose in life and discover personal meaning. And again, that may be in the moment. I also was looking at our website for the Institute and see the existential consideration for aging in the lifespan come out in what Frankl said: logos, the definition, meaning, meant, intended, and wisdom. When we're looking at our life and as we age and are looking at end of life, what was meant or intended for your life? In what do you find a meaning? Meaning brings together that which should come together in life. Frankl defined meaning as truth, beauty, goodness, love, rightness, and God. Those are all very personal and intimate for that individual. So even the mission for the Institute is to promote optimal human health and well-being through meaningful living, to advance the scientific foundation of Frankl's logotherapy and existential analysis, and foster evidence-informed applications of logotherapy, considering culture and context, which is a summary of my aim with this presentation and in the research. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Okay. Frankl's reference to the spiritual, as we know, is not in the religious sense. He views all humans as having a spiritual essence. And we know that the term he chose for that originated from two words: noetikos, which means intellectual, and noen, meaning to think. So for Frankl, noetic was of the mind. This ability is not shared with the animal kingdom, since they do not possess the power of consciousness in respect to the ability to think at higher order levels. And changing the verbiage here, humans can forage their deepest meaning inside the self, at the core of one's being in the individual. And even when challenged as we age, or we're looking at into life, or our body or our mind is failing, it's known that even in those moments when people can't communicate they may not be able to respond, they may not be able to express themselves, there's still activity going on within them and reflection, and often they return to those most meaningful moments in their life, or moments of significance. We also know that this can be achieved through self-transcendence, the ability to rise beyond ourselves and relate to something greater than ourselves. So these are how logotherapy differs from the current research on spiritual or religious aging on an individual level. And so Dr. Wong, who we all know after yesterday, just defines self-transcendence as basically a spiritual awakening that moves one's heart and soul so deeply that leading to the reorientation of one's life and purpose and a fundamental change in one's life. And he included the word soul. And the last two congresses, we've had a couple of medical doctors, Dr. Southwick included, present on the soul, but there's been many presentations exploring the soul as another layer that I do think needs to be considered and is very interesting. In describing the observations and personal experiences in the concentration camp, Frankl said that the prisoner who lost his faith in the future, his future was doomed. With the loss of belief in the future, he also lost his spiritual hold. He let himself decline and became subject to mental and physical decay. And I thought of this when Alex was speaking earlier, Frankl's experiences after the camp and his state at that period, and how Ellie, I believe Alex even said, may have saved him. Not necessarily from suicide, but from that darkness. So when confronted with suffering or a hopeless circumstance in life, such as end of life or decline, through the defiant power of the human spirit, our freedom lies in our unique ability to choose our attitude in response to situations, to rise above, transcend the challenge of the moment. I mentioned earlier that in Doreen's presentation, she spoke on attitude, and a question was posed by Teresa Lance. What about when we do have intellectual disabilities, cognitive, neurocognitive, when we may not be able or may not have the capacity to choose our attitude or our response to a situation? I'm still struggling with that. So I thought it was interesting when she presented that discussion, and I'm sure that someone here can address that, because I have seen where sometimes that ability may not be possessed or available. So I would like to hear from anyone on that contention. So throughout our lifespan as individuals, we're confronted with existential challenges and struggles that occur in the existential domain. When we age, we evaluate the meaning of life and death, our unique purpose in life. We try to make sense of our personal world and the world around us. So we're experiencing a spiritual age. But the current definition of spiritual age is not, again, the same as logotherapy's definition. It's not an existential approach. In older age, the questions and experiences may change or evolve. I know as I get older, I'm changing, and I hope I'm evolving positively. It's a constant struggle, but we grapple with our own questions of our existence. We may be called to support others, to transcend ourselves, to serve those. As a caregiver in different capacities, we're serving others in their own existential experiences while also having our personal experiences, and then even in suffering. So an example is, as those of you who are parents know, this is done daily. And as Landry here, as I've shared, children in turn can respond by supporting elders later in life. that becomes part of their existential aging and self-transcendence. They get to live logotherapy. So though Frankel's spiritual dimension is not in the religious sense, there are commonalities between the two. We're all spiritual beings, noetic beings, but we are not all religious. However, religious beings are spiritual beings according to logotherapy, because we all have a noetic dimension. We can see this in Frankel's teaching of how we access our noetic self through creativity, imagination, performing works, a commitment to task, responsibility, engaging in deeds, loving, compassion, forgiveness, humor. And again, in that phenomenological definition by Armstrong, much of that right there was stated. Our will to meaning, purpose in life, conscience, capacity for choice, and ideals arise from our noetic self. So looking through more tangible and obvious examples, creating something that expresses ourselves and our ability is reflected in the arts, as well as in our work, our home, and our problem-solving skills. I often hear when discussing creativity, people say, well, I'm not artistic or I'm not musical. And I think that it's important to recognize creativity is around us all the time, and we're engaging in it in our daily lives. Our works, deeds, and responsibilities may shine through our functions in the workplace, the home, the community, through serving others. Our relationships and interactions with others allow us to share our ability to love, forgive, demonstrate compassion and empathy, to laugh and experience joy. And each of these allow us to share and strengthen ourselves, offer challenges and the opportunity to choose our attitude and responses to life, provide purpose in life, and ultimately self-transcendence. So through these journeys, we discover meaning of the moment and our meaning of life at a given moment, especially as we age. Our awareness increases and our beliefs, values, morals, and hope can manifest. So the spiritual dimension, the noetic dimension, is alive within us every day. And as Frankel says, is the essence of our being. The noetic is within us throughout our lifespan, and it can be accessed even as our mind and body become impaired, which the other domains of aging do not address, including the spiritual and religious aging research out there now. So in life, we'll all experience difficulties and suffering. They may vary in degree, and they're not necessarily the same for any two people, but there are similarities. So if an example is, if a family suffers, each member will suffer in their own way. They're all going to respond differently, and each will have their own meaning discovery in their suffering. Our noetic self is alive within us always. This is important because even if we feel disconnected, lost, confused, or hopeless, our inner spirit is present and can be accessed. In our sickest moments, our greatest suffering, our oldest age, our noetic is always at the core of our being. When our mind and bodies are unwell, and even in the process of dying, our spirit is alive. And y'all likely recognize all of this as coming from Frankel. So in summary, the current domains of aging leave a gap in the unique experiences of the individual existentially. Individual existential experiences in the aging process merit consideration as an aging domain. The existing spiritual and religious domain does not account for the noetic dimension. Exploration or phenomenology, existentialism, and logotherapy is needed to determine if logotherapy can be accepted as a phenomenological approach on an ontic level. Logotherapy is, as a philosophy and a treatment modality, is established in the literature and can be included as an avenue within existential aging domain. So I think too, some future directions that could be evaluated or looked into a research as a response to aging using logotherapy or aging versus end of life considerations. I've seen much research, even from our own Dr. Stark, on end of life considerations, hospice, palliative care. Frankel published on that. I would like to see even more on the aging process. Normal aging mind versus the neurodegenerative diseases, people with processing disorders, special needs populations. I discussed the attitude and accessibility to choose one's attitude when confronted with these issues. And even meaning. And again, I would like to hear about that from some of you. Another area, natural aging versus aging with disease or non-natural deterioration. So the effects of substances and not necessarily are limited to illicit substances. Alex even talked about, the culture of overprescribing of prescription drugs, injuries, surgeries, head traumas, etc. Logotherapy for caregivers and their individual experiences, because as they're caregiving, they're aging. They're entering that aging population as well, and they're individuals and humans. So when we are caregiving for loved ones or as a profession or an act of service, we have our own personal aging experiences as well, and those experiences are affecting our existential aging. Oops, I'm sorry. And these are the references used. So I kind of rushed that, and I went against. I was telling you need to stop sharing. Landry here that I totally am against filling PowerPoints with words and reading, but I knew I would never keep all my thoughts organized and streamlined to get through this in 45 minutes and have time for discussion if I didn't do it that way. So I apologize. So I want to open it now for discussion. Any questions?
Thank you so much. Rod.
Sonya, hey, it is so good to see you.
Me
I
too.
just think you are such a wonderful person, and I really enjoyed your presentation, Sonya.
Thank you, Rod. It's great to see you too.
Yeah. So here's my question as I try to turn up my sound just a little bit. So there was something you said that moved me at a very deep level, and I think it's relevant to your presentation. And as an aside, thank you for allowing time for discussion. I love it when people can end on time so there can at least be some discussion. Though I know we're all passionate, we tend to go over. But you mentioned about, I think it was your father, and there were moments of meaning, right? Meaning in the moment you talked about, I think related to dementia. And I thought about this concept of validation theory when working with people with dementia. And I don't know if you're familiar with validation theory, but it's really a theory that you just engage where the person's at. Like if a person thinks they are back and they're a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old and they're asking you out on a date, or they think they're, at the zoo or something, as long as what they're experiencing is something positive, you just engage, right? So I remember when I worked with people with dementia, this older woman, right, with dementia, thought it was asking me out on a date, was thinking she was younger, so I think it was all appropriate, there's nothing inappropriate. But you engage, I'm flattered by your thought, right? And I just thought that is one way I think of connecting, possibly, I don't know, possibly with the noetic. I don't know if it would be or not, but capitalizing on those moments of meaning through validation theory and engaging with them at that time. Your thoughts on that, Sonya?
I was not familiar with validation theory as a formal term, except that I did that with my father. And I actually found what you said very affirming. We put him in a nursing home on a Friday afternoon, and he passed away the following Thursday morning. It was very quick. I kept him at home as long as possible. So I watched his decline, but those last few days were so quick. And one of the most powerful memories I have is before he went into a more unconscious state. He didn't go into a coma, just more unconscious and non-responsive. I knew he could hear us, but he couldn't respond. Is I walked in and he was dreaming and he was doing this. And I knew my dad well enough to know he was working on his race cars on a lift and he was underneath it. And to me, that was an example of him having meaning in that moment, even though his body and mind had failed him and he was hours away from dying. To me, he still had meaning and was working on his cars unconsciously. So I don't know, but I feel like that's along the same lines of what you were sharing.
Yeah. So if you can, you work on his car with him, or I think of our Congress 2 years ago with Alex Betny, or however you enunciate his last name, right? He was the keynote, and he tells the story of this Russian musician who, before he dies, is hearing the music. And the loved
Yeah.
ones around them are going, what music? There's no music, right? And validation therapy would be to engage with that. Hum it, let's sing it, so the person might then sing and so forth. So you're validating what I'm thinking, and I think I'm validating what you're thinking. But I just think there's, a possible area to fill this gap is some movement toward validation therapy, the way it's used, and its hopeful connection to creating meaning in the moment for people in those sort of, any sort of stage of dementia, but especially in the latter stages.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Michael, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Michael, you also posted in the chat, I saw.
Actually, I had two comments. One, I posted in the chat about gerotranscendence, which was Erik Erikson's life stage model. Usually people don't look at that one. That was something that he only did in his later years, surprise, surprise. And so he didn't have much time to develop that. But it's saying that after these other stages, you're looking at transcending. You're not focused on your life and looking back at your life. You're moving beyond that. And that's where the energy is. And that might be something for you to look at. But the other thing I think I just wanted to mention is I think you answered your own question regarding, can there still be meaning when the soma and the psyche are no longer responding normally? And the soma and the psyche are not noetic. The noetic, which is spiritual, which doesn't get sick, which doesn't die, which always has been, always will be, is still possible. Whether we can acknowledge that, whether we can see, like you saw your dad working on his race car, whether you can see that or not, that's, to me, that's a fundamental assumption of logotherapy, is that that's what we are. And so you still maintain that meaning, regardless of what's going on at the biological or the psychological level.
Thank you. I've been doubting myself. I do have Erikson. I've included Erikson's models, but in all of this, did not come across the gerotranscendence. I don't even remember that in my studies as a student or
because it's not there. It's not there.
Okay.
No introductory textbook has it in there. You have to look deeper. There are a few authors that have looked at that and studied it, but it's really hard to study because this is like people past their mid-80s. So finding people past their mid-80s willing to engage in psychological research. If you are in gerotranscendence, you're probably not interested in helping some scientist because you're focused on what's next, what's beyond this dimension. But it's very interesting and might be really good connection with what you're looking at here.
Well, thank you. I knew y'all would be able to offer what I was missing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're getting closer to the end of this session. First of all, thank you, Sonya, and your stepdaughter for being here with us and presenting and giving us such a wonderful insight, and also obviously getting people really interested and excited. So I'm really happy we also had the time for a small discussion. As per usual, I just want to highlight the opportunities of connecting and networking. I mean, I think most of you are in contact in some or the other way anyways, but you can also use the Cvent platform to do that for the next couple of days. And I would also ask you to fill out the session survey. You find the button on the right. I keep forgetting to mention that, so finally I remembered once more. And thanks everybody for another wonderful session. Thanks for presenting. Thanks for attending, for discussing. And let's have a few more of those for the remaining time of this wonderful conference. So I wish you a good day, good evening, and yeah, see you in one or another session soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thank you, Sabine.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Bye.